Hey, George, you're a scientist.
I'm a chemist, yes.
Right, you're a scientist. So, what would it take if I wanted everyone, everywhere, to get to have a white Christmas this Christmas? Not last Christmas. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart. But this Christmas, I want everyone to have a white Christmas at the same time on the whole planet.
Yes, excellent. Well, darn it, Lions, I am a chemist, not a doomsday scientist. But with my very limited knowledge and very limited expertise, I will attempt to apply to this. So let's start with some assumptions. First of all, in this premise, I am a mad scientist attempting desperately to make your dream come true, right? You know,
I like that's actually been the starting proposition a couple of times, because I think that really speaks to how difficult it is to get things that may seem simple on the surface.
Exactly, right? Because having a white Christmas, I mean, that happens all the time. But you're like, no. And one of the other parts of this is that we are approaching this with the idea that we are ensuring a white Christmas. So I want to make sure that those
guaranteed.
Guaranteed, which means that for some of these calculations, I made sure that the error bars were such that I made sure that it happened for everyone, where it was like, you know what, thing A would probably get it done. It's like, yeah, but I'm going to do thing B because I can't leave nothing to chance. We white Christmas for everyone. So with that in mind is that I did all of this effort with the idea that I am relying on nature to 0 degree, right? So So I'm not like, oh, well, this area, they always have white Christmases. In this area, 90% of the time. No, I am going to bathe the world in snow at your behest, right? Because you want to do a nice thing. Everybody should have a white Christmas, especially people who grew up in areas where that was never even a possibility.
Like New Zealand and the Outback.
Yeah, like Venezuela, right? So, the other premise, right, is the other assumption is that we are going to put 0.05 meters of snow over all land, which is roughly between 1 to 2 inches. That's a white Christmas,
Yeah. Yeah, it can't just be like a dusting that immediately melts. You need snow on the trees and on the rooftops.
Yeah, you want exactly. Otherwise, it would be almost like a letdown. It would be worse than if we did nothing, which we'll find out later what's absolutely the call in this situation. But, and the final, this isn't an assumption. This is just something to a premise, basically, is that 29% of the Earth is land, and we are only, of course, trying to coat the land, right? Because the snow would just fall on the water and kind of be wasted, right? And the funny thing is I started all of these calculations forgetting that part, and then and so I had to go back and redo some of it. But with the orders of magnitude that I was dealing with, it basically didn't even matter, right? Because it just cut all of my numbers in about a third, and I was like, yeah, but I don't know, man. This got out of hand many tens of thousands ago. So oh no, instead of 10,000, it's 3,000. Who cares? So there's two things we got to do. One is we got to get the water into the air, and then 2, we've got to get it to snow. Easy, right?
Yeah. That's just 2 things.
It's just 2 things, right? It's just 2 steps, It's just a 3-step process. 1, get underpants, then 2, then profit, right?
Yeah.
So first we got to get the snow into the air. So we need about 1.5 times 10 to the third, right? So about 1500 cubic kilometers of snow.
1,500. That number's not that big. Cubic. Kilometers.
Uh-oh. Yeah, because cubic meters. Cubic meters. I mean, that's a lot, but not a lot. It is roughly 1 million Empire State Buildings of snow. So if you were to do the world's biggest ice sculpture and build it into an Empire State Building, they'd be like, okay, cool. Now do that 1 million more times and you're good to go. So that. So that's the amount of snow that we need in order to give everyone their white Christmas. The density of snow is about 200 kilograms per cubic meter. So that means we need roughly 2.9 times 10 to the 14th kilograms of snow or water. So that's a lot. That's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
So the average surface temperature of the ocean is about 17 degrees Celsius, right? And so I kind of wrestled with this because I said, well, in theory, we could just go to where the water is, because we got to get it all into the air, right? It's like, well, let's go to where the water's already warm. And what I didn't do is I didn't worry about like weather patterns or cold fronts or, like different like ways that the water vapor would move through the earth. I'm like, that's way beyond my area of expertise, and it's not going to, in my opinion, make a huge difference. But I was like, it is cheating a little too hard to just focus on the equator, because you wouldn't just want to generate the cloud vapors there. You'd want to kind of do it ubiquitously. So I imagined that you would need to get a doomsday device, right, that could generate a ton of energy, and then you'd want to fire that energy at all latitudes, So I figure, probably in the neighborhood of like 1,000 of these massive like guns that are able to fire these like heat rays. I'm talking like comic book level heat rays, because, and this is something interesting. So in order to get water to boil, how do you go about that? If you were to boil water, how would you go about that?
Like on this scale, or like on a human scale?
On a human scale.
I mean, stove, electric kettle, microwave, right?
Yep.
Like, things that make a human amount of water boil.
Exactly. So let's assume that, because it would be a safe assumption, that you put the pot on the stove and then you turn it on to the highest possible setting, right? Once it heats up and equilibrates, it is pouring a consistent amount of heat into the system, right? So even at your elevation, about how long does it take to bring water from room temperature to boiling? Ballpark.
If it was like, a kettle's worth of tea, maybe a few minutes.
Couple minutes.
Yeah.
Now, let's say then you were to leave this pot on the stove opened at the top. How long would you have to leave it on there for all of that water to boil away?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I want to say not terribly long, like maybe 20 minutes.
Right, but substantially longer than it took for you to get from to boiling.
Yeah.
It would take much longer for you to then boil it all away, right?
Yes.
Because so that's the interesting part, is that when you're changing the temperature of water, right, is that first it starts off as ice, and then you've got to take it from ice to water. And the process of doing that, so basically if you're pouring energy into a system, let's say that you've got ice that's at negative 20 degrees Celsius, right? You pour energy into it and the temperature creeps up, and then it hits 0 degrees and starts to melt. You then have to continue to pour energy into it. The temperature will not change until all of the ice has melted. Then it'll start to warm up, and then it goes through what's called the heat of vaporization, which means you got to pour more energy into it just to get it up into the vapor state. So, in order to get the water from 17 degrees Celsius to boiling, takes 347 kilojoules per kilogram, right? So that's a fair amount of energy. In order to then vaporize all of that, it takes 2,260 kilojoules. So roughly 7 to 8 times as much energy to get it to all boil away, right? Which actually means that you were kind of in the ballpark where you said, 3 minutes. And it's like, okay, and then it would take about 8 times longer than that, so around 20 minutes. So you got it pretty close, man. That's pretty good. Even though you were just kind of taking a swag, You should be a scientist.
That's what I have you for.
I got a guy for that. It's side note, maybe in an after show sometime we should talk about the time when you were with some of your coworkers and some chemistry thing came up and you're like, I'm going to call my chemist. And they're like, you have a chemist?
Yes. The real punchline to that, because it's a good story. The real punchline of that story was another guy at the table had a chemist.
Anyways, but so in order to do this, you would then need to again, with these giant heat rays that we've created, you would need to generate 1 times 10 to the 21st joules of energy in order to get all of that water up, which, this is where scientific notation fails us, right? Because 1 times 10 to the 21st, you're like, I don't know, like it's just 21. 21's not a lot, right? But, that's, of course, as we all know, a 1 followed by 21 zeros. So it's roughly, and so this is where I'm like, okay, well, let me put this into numbers that people can understand.
A trillion is only 12 zeros.
It's only 9. Sorry, no, you're right. The trillion's 12.
A billion is 9.
Billion's 9.
Do you want to know the pathetic reason I know that? Because there is a like complete douche character that you are supposed to hate in the show Silicon Valley, and he sells his stupid business like back in the early 2000s, and so he is technically a billionaire because he sold his business, and his net worth hovers like around $1 billion. And so what he says is, I'm in the 3 comma club. And it's like, so it's like a super quick shorthand, and it's like, oh, okay, so 3 commas, 3 zeros per comma, so 9 zeros, so that's $1 billion. So then and it's just like, what are you doing, brain? Why are you holding on to that?
quick pop quiz. When are all your children's birthdays? But 3 comma club. So basically, so then I will now take you all down the same rabbit hole I went down, because I was like, I want to put this in terms of nuclear explosions, right? Because that's something we can all kind of understand. You know, we've all seen like the old pictures of like, you know, oh my God, the humanity. And, you know, like
we all saw Oppenheimer last summer.
Yeah, we all did.
Well, you live that life, so it doesn't. For me, it was spectacle. For you, as a scientist, I assume it would have been unremarkable.
It was funny because when you said, "Well, you live that life," my knee-jerk retort was, "What do you think I do?" And then I realized we have an entire podcast based off of the premise.
Yeah, and to be fair, part of your answer so far has involved having a doomsday device. So
yeah, you know. So then I was kind of going through it, and it turns out that the order of magnitude of nuclear devices we have made varies wildly, which I didn't know. I knew that there was some swing on it, but just to give you a frame of reference, the bomb that we dropped on Nagasaki had about in the neighborhood of like a 50 megaton payload, you know, which is a lot. 50 megatons of TNT is a lot. The SAR bomb, which is the largest nuclear weapon ever made, was 1,000 times more powerful than that. Yeah, so it's just like, dude, was it not enough? Like, that was enough, right? Makes me think of Toby, where he's just like, you know, oh, well, we're not going to have an actual Boy Scout drop off the check. Why not? Well, because it's being held at night in our dangerous warehouse, and there's gambling and drinking, and Hooters is catering. Is that enough? Did that? So, you know, it's like 50 megatons. It's like more. It's like, come on, guys. But anyways, so I say all of that to say that initially I was going to compare it to, you know, the most powerful nuclear weapon ever. And I was like, that doesn't really work as well. So I went ahead and compared it to the Fat Man, which most of us have seen videotapes of like that nuclear explosion to frame in your mind. And it would take 10 billion of those in order to get all of the water up into the air. Right. So,
as you said, doomsday device.
Yeah, exactly. So I figured that, you know, since for other reasons we're going to have to send stuff into space, so bear with me. You know, you would just have a series of these doomsday lasers kind of like circling the Earth, you know, at like the mid latitude, you know, and they all just like fire. But the thing is, you know, when they fire, they don't fire on December 25th. No. They fire on the 16th, because it takes about 9 days for the precipitation to go from when it goes into the Earth's atmosphere to precipitate down. So this actually takes some planning, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, this is what every retail store has to deal with, right? You can't be firing your Christmas lasers on Christmas Eve. You got to be firing your Christmas lasers like mid Thanksgiving time. Like you got to be getting ready for Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. Right about the time you're getting really sick of Mariah Carey Christmas songs, that's when you should be firing your space lasers in order to give everybody a white Christmas. So since we've already jettisoned some other stuff out in space, we've now got all of this water in the atmosphere. So that's great. What do you think the next big problem is that we got to deal with?
Well, a ton of water in the atmosphere sounds like we are still a few steps away from clouds over land that will turn into snow, because there's lots of places that have water in their atmosphere that don't get snow. So I don't know quite how you're going to handle that part.
Right. And because that's the thing, is that like we're not asking it for everyone to get a rainy Christmas. We want everyone to get a white Christmas.
Yeah, nobody wants a rainy Christmas. That song sounds stupid just on the face of it.
Right. It's silly. So I was like, okay, well, the problem that you deal with is that it's just the Earth's too hot, right? And what's the thing that just makes the Earth hot all the time? So we're going to need to blot out the sun. In a true Burnsian fashion. But we're not just doing it over Springfield. We got to Springfield. We got to cover the whole Earth, right? So the interesting thing is that, so I was like, okay, well, if you put like a giant, basically a solar panel, whatever they make solar sails out of, like a very, very thin metal sheet, right? Between Earth and the sun, that would do it, you'd think. But the problem is, as I said, it's be made out of similar material to a solar sail. And what do solar sails do? They use
photons by the sun.
Get pushed by the sun. And I don't want to make a solar sail just for it to get blown away by the sun. No. So what you actually have to do is create a series of like angled cones that reflect the light around the Earth to another mirror that's behind the Earth, that then reflects it to another mirror that's behind the Earth, that then can reflect it back at the back of the panel, which will then keep it balanced and in place. So you need several very, very large, devices in order to basically reflect the light around Earth. But if you did that, then you could blot out the sun. And then for my calculations, and somebody pointed out to me as I was kind of running through this, is they were like, well, you didn't really account for A and B. I'm like, dude, order of magnitude stuff, man. Yeah, you're right. But so I was like, okay, but we need to make sure that everyone is getting the white Christmas, right? So I said, what area is the hottest on Christmas? And from more Google searching than I thought it would take in order to get this, it turns out that Cancun tends to run pretty warm around this time.
I mean, that's not super surprising.
Right. And so the hottest Christmas they have on record is 31 degrees Celsius. So 31 degrees Celsius. So then what we need to do is make sure that they are going to have a white Christmas. So in very humid areas, the typical delta between night and day is about 6 degrees Celsius, right? So if you assume that, and you assume that we want to get somewhere between 5 to 0 degrees Celsius, which is what you would need in order to have actual snow precipitation, we would need to blot out the sun for about 6 full days, So
okay. Again, planning required.
Planning required, right? So again, so like on the 16th, we fire our space lasers, and then we say everybody, hey, be prepared for overcast skies for the next 3 days, and then night. And so then, as the temperatures get colder and colder, and now keep in mind, because like I said, we're really trying to make sure that everybody gets this white Christmas. The places that were already cold get very cold, like a earth-shattering amount of cold, like a maybe everyone could be dying amount of cold. Not to mention the fact that any place that has any sort of outdoor vegetation, I mean, all that's gone. That's a distant memory, Probably places that were not prepared for it, pipes start bursting because nobody has the infrastructure set up for what it is that we're doing. And so then once we have done that, we've cooled the Earth down, and then all we just need to do, honestly, is wait. And then snow will fall out after the 9 days, and it will all hit the Earth, and we will all have a white Christmas. Many will die, but white Christmas. And in the end, isn't that what Christmas is all about?
I mean, I don't have time to double check right now, so I'm just going to say yes. Yes, that is what Christmas is about. So I'm curious, would we need to do the cooling of the land before we did the heating of the water? Because what I would hate to happen is for some of that moisture to come back down as rain. So in doing it in the order you said, are you confident that the kind of like the precipitation cycle would take long enough that it would only fall as snow?
I'm confident enough.
Yes.
But to your point, right, is that why chance it? Like, let's go the full 9 days. And actually, if we really wanted to get crazy about it, I approached it as a like, hey, we're going to use the normal water cycle to our advantage. But we could actually, if we were being clever, we could cut that whole step out, right? You don't need to vaporize any water at all. You could just put the sun the sun blotting out device in place. Because if you did it around Thanksgiving, right? Far enough in advance, right? So Thanksgiving is done, and we're now all gearing up for Christmas, and so we got about 45, maybe days ish, right? Yeah, you could just do that, because then what would happen is the carbon dioxide would precipitate out as snow, so of the atmosphere, and that would for sure get the job done, right?
How cold is it for carbon dioxide to freeze into crystals that we would call snow? Because my thinking is, if you were afraid of people freezing to death a minute ago,
oh yeah, no, everyone dies in this scenario, right? Like it will be a cold Christmas, and it would be a white Christmas enjoyed by none.
Yeah, but it'd be a white Christmas for everyone forever.
The carbon dioxide freezing point is somewhere around negative 78.5 degrees Celsius or negative 109.3 degrees Fahrenheit. And so the thing is that, like, with what the initial proposition, right, is that, because I was talking to somebody about this at work, hilariously, and they were like, so that kills everybody, right? I'm like, you know what? It wouldn't be a true doomsday scenario. Like, many would die, right? And there would be a lot of damage, especially to like breadbasket areas, to like food production, to obviously to like cattle, and to anything that eats anything that eats things and then we eat it. Like, all of that's probably gone, But the Earth would probably recover if you figure that if we're assuming that we have about sustenance level calories, right? We would probably see, if I had to guess off the top of my head, somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 50% reduction in human population, somewhere in there, right? But it would be recoverable, right? This,
no,
nah, man, because you'd go down to this deep, and then you'd have to warm it all back up, right? So if you then just removed everything, then all of a sudden all of the carbon dioxide would start to warm up. But then you got to figure that you went like 180 days burying everything in intense snow. So yeah, and I take that back. Actually, for the cold snap like that, it might not even, it may be closer to like the 10%, maybe even less, But yeah, the second one, that's closer to nuclear winter than anything else, which it actually would be another way to get the job done. If you just fired off all of the nukes and then did a nuclear winter, we'd have a couple of white Christmases, white everything.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is that there's a lot of ways to do this,
Yeah, and it's good to have options, because you hate to find out like so close to the holiday, you're like, oh no, they already have that doomsday device. I actually need to get them. What do you get for the person who already has every doomsday device?
So sorry, I was just thinking, I was like, okay, so in theory, it's like, hey, I want to get everybody a white Christmas, but I don't have a lot of money. It's like, okay, that requires more planning, because all you have to do is put out a sun blotting device, and that's it. But you got to get out ahead of it 45 days in advance. It's like, oh man, I really didn't get my Christmas shopping done. I really didn't get this Christmas thing done. So, all right, well, it's going to cost more money, because now we got to boil a lot of the water in the ocean. It's like, oh man, dude, last minute, I'm frantically, it's Christmas Eve. I'm trying so hard to find some gifts for the family. It's like, dude, just set off all the world's nukes and nuclear winter, I mean, it's not ideal, but it'll get the job done. So yeah, so you've got the whole kind of Christmas story worth of like how to go about this, Yeah,
I look forward to the Hallmark adaptation of this story.
And I just thought, like, nuclear winter, aka deadbeat dad white Christmas.
I promised my kids a white Christmas, and darn it, they're gonna have a white Christmas.
As it shows his finger slowly going towards a button.
Yeah, a bunch of guys turning keys at the same time. Credits. Well, this reminds me of some other holidays you could probably ruin.